In this short video tutorial, I'm going to show you the basics of using Camera Raw. And Camera Raw is a filter now. It's under the filter menu, as you can see here. And it's got some nice, simple ways of adjusting your image. But before we go into it, first I'm going to right mouse click on my layer name and I'm going to make it a smart object. And what this means is when I add a filter, and I'll quickly do Camera Raw, the filter will be added non-destructively. So I'll just quickly do OK. I won't change anything. There you go. You see, we now have a Camera Raw filter as an effect. So I'll double click on the name Camera Raw filter and we go back into it. And how does this work? Well, it's very straightforward. We have a histogram at the top, the red, green, blue values here, and we've got basic, curve detail, etc. We've got some various options here. So if I go to basic, for example, we can muck around with the white balance. I can click on that and click somewhere to change it if I want, as you can see, which is quite nice. Or I can go back to as shot, or I can choose auto, of course, as you can see there. I can change the temperature. Whenever you're changing these sliders, do keep an eye out on the histograms at the top. And if you go too far, you'll notice the triangles here going to like a warning. The details are clipped, either for the dark areas or the bright areas. So just keep an eye out for that. And I'll drag the tint as well. You see, I can muck around with that. Exposure, contrast, and so on. It's entirely up to you how do you want to play it. It works very, very nicely. And it's a simpler way than Photoshop does, but it is very quick. And there's nothing wrong with using Camera Raw and then going back to Photoshop and using levels, curves, etc. If I close down the basic, here we have curves again. And I can move this up and down, just like in Photoshop. And I can change the red values, green or blue, if that's what I want. Detail, so sharpen, noise reduction, etc. Very useful. Color mixer, and let's say I want more yellows or less, depending. Color grading, so I can muck around with the shadows, the highlights, and the midtones. If there's any distortion, you can either add it or you can take it away, as you can see here. We haven't got any distortion, but it's quite useful. You can play around with, again, any distortions with the geometry here, as you can see what's happening, but I'll disable that. You can play around with some basic effects, like you can add a grain, add vignetting, which is quite nice. And a calibration if needed, so you can muck around with some basic stuff. And if I click on OK, there we go. And because I've done this as a smart object, I can now hide the Camera Raw filter and show it, which is quite nice. And because also it's a smart object, I have an effect mask, so I could click on the brush tool after selecting the layer mask, black foreground, and I can mask out the areas I don't want to be affected, which is quite nice as well. And that's the basics of using the Camera Raw filter.